Don't speak too much, walk like I don't speak too much. Walking, those I like. You know I'm coming. I'll be riding around with you. I'll be riding around with you. By the drumstick. You know I'm coming. I'll be riding around with you. I'll be riding around with you. Those I like.
Yeah, man. 10 days in a foreign end without you here. Dead weight, I've been holding on to my let go here. Still in the rust right here. Still in the rust right here. Still in the rust right here. Right here. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days.
You know I'm coming. I'll be riding around with you. I'll be riding around with you. By the drumstick. You know I'm coming. I'll be riding around with you. I'll be riding around with you. Cause I like. You know I'm
10 days in a foreign end without you here. Eyes wider and my thoughts older, but you're still not here. Still in the rust right here. Still in the rust right here. Still in the rust right here. Right here.
back it up and dump it. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. Back it up and dump it. Back it up.
10 days, 10 days, 10 days.
Don't speak too much, walk like I don't speak too much. Walking, those I like. You know I'm coming. I'll be riding around with you. I'll be riding around with you. By the drumstick. You know I'm coming. I'll be riding around with you. I'll be riding around with you. Those I like.
Yeah, man. 10 days in a foreign end without you here. Dead weight, I've been holding on to my let go here. Still in the rust right here. Still in the rust right here. Still in the rust right here. Right here. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days.
You know I'm coming.
We are. And we're live. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for being able to join us here today. This is now the 5th episode of the Great British Builders. I'm here joined by Theo. who's been an awesome talent. He's been coding since he was 11, exited his first company at 15, and then now has been building Noda at 17 years old. In the first year, they've already done 1.2 million in revenue, and I'm excited to be able to welcome him here to the stage here today, talk about all about his story, how he kind of got into the ecosystem, and about where you want to kind of take it from here. So, Theo, why don't you just give everyone a little bit of like that short introduction about yourself and a bit about what Noda and what you're building there.
Okay, so thank you, Cap. So a really basic introduction about me is, well, he already mentioned I'm 17. I work with infra, I work with hardware. Hardware is the main thing I focus on. I optimize systems, I lower latency, and I cut your cost. That's basically what I do. And I've been doing this for the past 4 years, both in Web 2 and Web 3. And in my previous company, we grew it to over 65 million AR in 3 years. And after that, I just decided, okay, why not take the exact same model and put it in Web 3? Because why wouldn't it work? So why not? And that's sort of what we are doing now, Noda. We cut latency by using our fully owned and optimized hardware stack. We own our fibers, we own our bare metal, we own everything you can think of, really. And that lowers your cost, latency. And that's about it. That's basically the main things we do.
No, and I think it's really cool how you focus in on the infra. Like, what specifically kind of took you down this path?
I think it was because when I was really small, both my parents worked in telecoms, which is very, very hardware. Also very Web 2 and traditional. But at the same time, this industry is an industry where people work long hours, meaning I got brought to work a lot. So I just walked around, roamed around the building, and then I got to see a lot of hardware. I got to interact with a lot of engineers, and like engineers that are working on telecom hardware like 24/7, they don't often see a child just walk up to them and, hey, what are you doing? And then so I just had a lot of conversations with random engineers, and then that got me really intrigued because like hardware, I don't know why, but it just clicked in my like it's just something that I really wanted to do. And then I just decided, okay, I'll do that in the next couple of years.
Was there any key conversations that you had with one of the engineers that really stuck out to you and is memorable now as like, wow, that really I left that conversation itching for more?
This is a difficult one because a lot of the conversations with the engineers was just them teaching me how things worked.
Fair.
But there was one conversation. It wasn't an engineer. It was one of the managers of an engineering team. Basically, he told me there's nothing you can't achieve with a large amount of hardware. And then he showed me a lot of track records that they've done. They've solved many, many problems that were really difficult or just things they wanted to solve for ages, but they couldn't because it's not something that a human can calculate or anything. So they built hardware. They used hardware to solve these problems. That was like a turning point for me. I just realized how much hardware can do. It's not just what runs your internet. It's not just what allows you to play games or whatever. It's so much more. It's solving real problems.
And when you talk about some of those initial problems that you was even noticing when you were first starting out, you talk about they were building in the telecom space. You know, how did then that lead to, because your first business was a VPN business,
yes,
correct? And so how did some of these like initial notices, things that you saw kind of then start inspiring for you to go down that path?
So one of the things I noticed when interacting with these engineers is a lot of traditional companies, they had very old and just not great systems that relied on internal IPs or IPs that can only, or basically networks that can only be accessed when you're at their office or whatever. But when COVID hit, that just is a massive problem for them because their employees are all at home and none of them can use their systems. And I thought, okay, this is a really dumb problem. How can I solve it? And a VPN is a really easy solution for this. So you set up this VPN node at basically the office and just allow their employees to just go back in there and then access their office software as they would usually. So for me, it was just a really obvious thing that just felt kind of easy to do. And it worked because like so many companies relied on these systems. They couldn't operate without it. So they didn't really care that they had to pay a premium for a random kid to set up something on their network. So that's sort of how my journey started. And then I think it's because I was really young and I was speaking to some of these people. And then they were impressed that I actually managed to solve their problem. And then they sort of just brought me deeper into just commerce and chamber of commerces across Hong Kong, and just sort of that's how I grew. That's how I learned. That's how I built connections, and basically, yeah.
Yeah. And so, even when you talk about Hong Kong, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about like where you grew up, what it was like, kind of like the childhood, kind of like that took you now to then be here in the UK.
So I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I lived in there until I was 13. That was just because one, COVID, to some political issues. It's not really a stable place to live, although I do love my country. But at the same time, there are better places to be. So that's sort of why I'm here in the UK, and I've been here for the past 4 years ish. And it's sort of why I'm talking to you, because if I wasn't here, I would have never met you guys.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you then look across like the global landscape and opportunities that can exist. Was there any particular reason why your family chose to come here to the UK across like anywhere else they could have gone?
That was mainly that was because Hong Kong was previously a colony. So
Okay, yeah.
the UK government allowed us a really easy path to gain citizenship, and allowed us to just basically stay here until situations maybe stabilized or something. That was the original hope. But, well, it hasn't really changed. It's kind of gone worse. So I guess I'm just here now.
And so if we then talk a little bit more about like how you're growing. So you talk about how you're at this telecom company that your parents were at, asking all these engineers questions. They were like, oh, great. Like, this is great. I'll tell you the secrets. Don't worry. And he was able to then be picking up this knowledge and everything. What then started getting you coding? So like we talked about like, okay, where the interest in hardware came in and how that kind of led towards it. But what was your first step towards like, oh, now I actually want to be building this myself rather than just like managing a team that were building this?
At the very beginning, I learned software because hardware is useless if there's nothing running on it. So and there's not that many public VPN clients or anything you can use. So I just thought, okay, I'll just build my own. Why not? It's something I can learn. It's definitely a skill that would be useful in the future. And it was really useful. It proved really useful in all my future businesses because random tasks, I saved a lot by not needing to find a developer to do small tasks. It's really, really useful knowing at least basic code. So that's sort of how I made the shift. But although me right now, I still mainly focus on hardware because it's still my main passion.
And then so let's talk about the progression. So you started building this VPN business. What started to happen? I was like, you worked for that telecoms company that your parents were at, and I was like, cool, this solved their solution. How did it start scaling and going to the next level?
That was a little bit of what I mentioned just now. I got introduced to Chamber of Commerces. And then Chamber of Commerces are usually filled with very, very traditional businesses. Businesses that really rely on those office systems. That's sort of how I scaled it really easily because almost every single person I spoke to that was a member, they had the same problem. And word of mouth spreads really quick when it's a major problem across an industry. So that was really easy for us to scale. It was really easy for us to grow, and it was just kind of why not, because it didn't cost us much. It was a very no-brainer idea that just generated a bunch of revenue, and it showed me how much being an entrepreneur can grow / how much you can do in just a very short period of time. That was shocking to me because like as a student at like 12 years old, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And somehow, while I didn't know what I was doing, I managed to achieve this. I managed to have over 65 different clients across Hong Kong. That was just mind-blowing to me. And then that's sort of what stuck with me the entire time, even until now, because it's just building. Building is the most fun thing you can really do for me, I guess, because I just enjoy it.
And you almost kind of like answered the question I was going to ask there of like having that success. How did that start making you feel? You know, you talk about like that enjoyment. It really just kind of like taught you this idea that building can have an impact, you know, and what I create here can be able to then generate real value for the world around me. You know, was there any other like sticking feelings that really is like that, like, because it almost like solidified your path going down the founder journey, right? Like after that kind of moment, the idea of working for a company probably didn't cross through your mind. It was more of like, I want to keep doing this.
So basically 2.5 years into running that business, I basically had to move And I just started panicking because, like, okay, it's a very traditional business. If I don't have in-person dealings, how am I going to continue it? And it's not exactly easy to hire someone to take over everything. So I started looking for people to buy me out or just let me exit. And the fact that there were so many people interested immediately, that was something really crazy for me, because I'm just a random kid that built something and just spoke to random older people / traditional businesses. Why is everyone so interested in me? So that was a key point for me. And then it just, basically what you said, it solidified my journey on becoming a founder, because it's just rewarding.
And like for everyone listening, you did then go and exit that business.
Yes.
And how was that journey? How was that experience? It's a milestone that not many founders reach. But how was it finding for you?
At the time, I was really happy because I was, okay, I don't need to worry about this anymore. And I can go do whatever I want to after, because I knew it wasn't going to stop there. It was just not going to stop there. So that gave me a lot of freedom. Although I did get fucked on the valuation.
Well, so what did you learn from that? Because there's learnings and everything.
Don't trust traditional funds that seem really nice to you.
And what was the extra due diligence that you would have been able to do, or you would hope that were done beforehand that kind of took away from that experience?
I didn't know how to properly value myself. I didn't know how much I had actually built and how much the traction was worth. So I didn't know what to do. It's a path that's really hard to navigate.
Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And like when you're kind of going through those experiences, you do put a level of trust around the people who are there in order to be able to help that guidance, be able to make sure that you get the best outcome that's socially there. And obviously you just have to remember the biases. So obviously the person buying you is biased towards like underquoting it versus like an external advisor who would then be able to come in and say, actually, this is where we kind of stand here. There's like these metrics that justify then this valuation, and that's where you need to like stand firm around it. And they want it, they'll come up to that.
Mm-hmm. That is a really hard thing to learn when you're being rushed to exit.
Yeah. So because you had that pressure, like you're saying, like you wanted to have that smooth exit so you can be able to then go on to the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And this was when you were 15?
Yes, this was when I was 15.
So this was a couple of years ago. He was able to go through this.
It was pretty fun. It was a really fun experience.
And how did then Noda come about? So now you're in the UK. You've just exited this company. How did the idea of Noda then begin?
There was a second company in between Noda and VPN. It was a very traditional, just server hosting company. It just ran Web2 bare metal, VMs, anything you can think of. And we had a really great DDoS protection network. And that's basically what we worked on. And that was our main selling point. Mm-hmm. And we gained a lot of governmental agency clients like the US state of Texas and a lot more. So that was a really kind of crazy thing for me, because I realized not only just corporate companies, even governments need access to hardware that's performing really well. And then that sort of just made me think, okay, what other industries could I potentially enter into? And I just saw crypto. Crypto was very, very much my sort of vibe, because I really hate bureaucracy. I hate really dumb corporate structures where things have to go through 20 different layers just to have a decision made. So
don't worry, DAOs are trying to get closer to that.
Exactly. So I just didn't want to. So I just thought, okay, Web3 is somewhere that I can completely avoid that. So I just thought, okay, let's do this.
Awesome. And well, so let's then talk about that middle company first of all. Tell us a little bit how that started. How did that begin? Because you were still running the VPN business at the same time.
Kind of,
and
yes.
Then you were starting to explore this other project. So how did that come about, starting to run those servers?
So basically, as a VPN company, your main cost is renting servers and paying internet bills. So when you see that your main cost is renting servers, you just think, okay, why not try and do it myself? Because at that point, we had a lot of revenue. We were very positive cash flow. We could afford buying hardware. So I just tested, okay, if I replace it with my own stack, how much am I saving? And then I realized, oh my God, these guys that I was renting from is making like a 65% margin on me. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So that's sort of how it came about, because it was another no-brainer thing, because our team at the time, we had experience operating that sort of hardware, and we also already built out a DDoS protection network just for our own use.
Mm.
And that was just a really important thing, and it wasn't really publicly accessible at that point. So that's sort of how it started, I guess.
And so you talk about the DDoS network being like a really competitive advantage for you. Just for if anyone who's not aware, do you want to explain what that is and why that's important? Because it also leads into the next question about like these government agencies and why they would then super value this kind of like tech.
DDoS attacks, in a really basic sense, it's just an attack where a malicious actor just tries to spam you with a lot of random data from various different locations or computers or whatever. And the main goal of that is just to take your website down, take your application down, or anything. It's just to affect or disrupt your operations. That cannot happen for a governmental agency. Like, you cannot have 999 go down. That is literally the worst thing that could happen. So these governmental agencies, they realized they can't cheap out on protection. So we just started charging a premium on providing protection that was proven to work, because we had a lot of random DDoS attacks that was hitting us. We were very publicly marketing ourselves as a very well protected network, and that sort of triggered a lot of people to try and attack us, and it didn't really work. At the time, we withstood one of the world's largest DDoS attacks by packets per second, for anyone technical, and that was basically the biggest track record you could have as a company. And once governmental agencies see that, they're like, hey, this guy's not dumb. He's not bullshitting. So we can trust him, maybe. And then that's sort of how it's got those clients, I guess.
And where did those clients come from? You know, like, is it a random email that got sent? Did you win a governmental contract for it? You know, how does that process work?
It was half-off. At the time, we had a few people on our sales team. I decided to put two of them and me to try and just reach out to corporate governments, show them our track record, say, hey, you're vulnerable. Why not spend a little bit more and protect yourselves? And then that instantly intrigued many, many people, because although they're not technical, they understand what vulnerable means. So
they get what vulnerable means.
Exactly.
I'm in trouble. I don't need to know how I'm in trouble, but I've been told I'm in trouble, and I've got a solution to fix it. All right,
Exactly.
Fix me.
That was basically how almost every single one of those government clients came about.
And you talk about like you and your sales team there. Like, so what was like the team like? Because like even from like the VPN one into the server business, you know, what teams were you starting to bring together? And just describe to everyone your then role in that as well.
For the VPN one, when I exited, it was still just a team of 5. It was, well, as a startup, no one has really any fixed roles. You just do whatever you need to do. So that one, I'll just skip.
But even just the 5, you know, I'm still curious.
Because it was very traditional and it was people that preferred in-person meetings, a lot of them were just BD/client relationship people.
Okay. Yeah,
so that's sort of the key thing you need when you're dealing with very traditional people, especially in Southeast Asia. It's just sort of tradition. That's sort of how that team was. Yeah, basically. And then on the second company, the server hosting company, it was a lot different. Our team at current stages, like it still exists right now. I'm just not involved in operations. It's around a team of 150. We have anywhere from engineers, network engineers, we have support people, we have anyone you can think of. So I don't know how to answer your question.
Well, so just talk about the first hire.
First hire was actually an engineer, because I just couldn't always go to different locations to fix things or install things. It was just sort of logical.
Was you the only engineer in the VPN business?
At the very beginning, yes. But then later we hired a second one.
Okay, yeah. And then when growing at that server business, you brought on another engineer to begin with. Like at what state? Because like 150 is a lot of people. You know, it's no small feat to be having a business operating at that scale. So how did you find like growing that was? Did you bring on like a chief of staff in order to be able to manage that scale? Was you personally interviewing people to be able to bring them in? You know,
For
how did the company scale?
for the first, I think 10-ish employees I personally interviewed. That was just because we didn't really have anyone else to do that at that point.
Of course.
Later on, we brought on a COO, and then he basically dealt with most of it. Not it was more than just a chief of staff role because he was dealing
Yeah.
with a lot of operations, and because as a server hosting company, you will have locations across the world, and my time zone may not always be suitable for talking with other people in across the world.
Yep.
So that's sort of how I decided to hire someone that was completely opposite of the world from me. So that is sort of how it later worked, and then he basically handled most of the hiring, and I didn't really touch anything.
So where did the COO come from?
It was actually I asked around in clients / people I knew from the VPN company, and then a lot of people referred this person.
Mm.
He was basically known within Hong Kong as a really talented sort of people manager, and
Okay.
he used to work for a large telco company. Not sure why he left, but then basically he left. So yeah, we basically picked him up, and that was probably the best hire I've ever made.
Oh, man, like it's such an important role when you're early on, especially when
Exactly.
you want to get the scale to like quick. Because like, how quickly did you go from yourself to 150 employees, or even like to the first 100?
To the first 100, I think a year and a half. I think.
And
Which
so like
is
people are coming in each time. And was you scaling for the contracts? So as you got new contracts in, that's where you have to bring on more people to facilitate it, especially if it's in different areas across the world.
That was mainly how we did it.
Yeah.
Because, well, there's no point in hiring new people unless we actually need them. And government contracts, once you know you've got it, you've got a lot of time to prepare. So you don't really need to pre-hire. So
Okay.
it's really good for us.
And that was like doing servers, setting orders up, and you were owning the servers. And so you were then being able to buy out this hardware. So then you're able to have that competitive advantage in these deals as well, take more margin for yourself to continue growing the pie. And then as you then started to explore more in the Web3 world, you notice as like, oh, actually, this is ideologically a place I would want to be. And I want to be able to get more involved into, you know, to tell us like a bit about the story of then how Noda then came out of then that server business. And we'll talk then a little bit more about Noda.
Okay, so I mean, it's in the name, Noder. It's nodes. Nodes is basically like the core piece of infrastructure on every single chain. Every single chain, they have RPCs, validators, sequencers, or anything you can really think of. They are the infrastructure on every chain. They are the sort of hardware / software that's running the entire chain. Without it, it wouldn't exist. Applications wouldn't work. And without fast ones, applications would be really, really unusable. So to us, basically, that was the main sort of target we wanted to do because we really like working with infrastructure. I brought over a couple people from my previous company, and they were also very, very infrastructure focused people. And to us, it was the only sort of aspect across the entire ecosystem that made sense for us to work on because it's hardware. It runs on hardware. Yeah.
And it's like that founder market fit that we talk about so much. You know,
Exactly,
and I think there's a really nice connecting story between the VPN business and you just noticing that problem after COVID happened and needing to be able to connect the dots between these companies talking to one another, but not access to the actual internal servers, towards then you being like, wait a minute, I'm paying so much money to these bloody servers. Like I could just do it ourselves. Like you were generating enough where it's like, cool, we're going to invest into it. We're going to take the risk. We're going to experiment. The experiment really paid off. And then it taught you as actually we can scale that part of it alone. And then you started scaling that out, landing these big contracts in order to like continue to really properly scale across. And then what I'm curious of, why did you step down from that like traditional web, like more the Web 2 side of it in order to go into Web 3? Was it just that personal passion that was like, hey, actually it's worked really well here. And I just want to now bring that to a new industry. What was like the big pull that then caused you to make that jump?
There was many reasons as to why I made this change, but one of the main ones is government contracts are on like 10-year periods. So if I've taken all of the government contracts I can, I'm not going to wait 10 years for a new contract. I like to build. I like to work on things, not sit and watch existing infrastructure just run. So I just thought, okay, this is way too boring for me. So why not step down? And at the same time, at a certain point, you may no longer be the best suited person for a leadership role. Because yes, you were really good at growing it, you were really good at scaling it, but maintaining and sort of just keeping a business afloat is a completely different thing. It's way harder in Web 2 especially. So I just thought, okay, it was kind of logical for me to just step down basically.
It's very mature to see that as well. To be able to take that little bit of like step away from your own personal in order to be like, hey, best is to grow. I need to hand it over to somebody else. And now when we talk about Noda, let's dive into the weeds a little bit. So what are you now doing better than everybody else? When I think I already know a little bit of the answer, but I want you to be able to like share with everybody about like, hey, what is this edge that Noda brings to the market?
We are the only provider across almost every chain that owns our entire stack from the fiber up. We own the fibers, we own the network layer, so all of the routing and everything in between. We own all of the bare metal. This allows us to optimize at every single point. People currently, because everyone's just renting hardware, they optimize on the software front. You're getting maybe a fraction of a millisecond. But on hardware fronts, you can optimize a lot more. You can cut latency by like half. It is an insanely different world where no one has been able to work on because no one owns their infra. And that is also a key sort of problem across Solana, especially because like 3 years ago, not even 2 years ago, a server hosting company called Hetzner, they just decided they were not going to allow Sol nodes or any crypto nodes at all. That was one of the times where Sol went down just because someone decided, hey, fuck you. I'm not going to let you run Sol infra on my systems. That's a key problem. You can't have a chain fail because someone doesn't like you. That is a major problem that Solana has yet to work on. Right now, around 80 to 90% of the entire Solana network is run on 2 providers. These 2 providers are very centralized, and they could at any point make the same decision that Hetzner did 2 years ago. So this is really dangerous for Solana, and even the foundation knows it. That's why they have the delegation program, because they want more people to run their own validators. That's sort of why they're so selective with that program. Because if you're just going to run on the same infra, then why would they give you stake? So that's the sort of key thing we like to work on. We want to allow people to have a infra stack that doesn't or will never get affected by external factors or any factor at all, really.
And how are you offering that? Like, what different products are you serving? How do people start using Noda?
So our main model is when let's say you want an RPC node from us, we don't just rent it to you. We offer a lease to own model. So basically, on top of your rent payment, you're paying X amount. And then let's say if your contract was 12 months, after 12 months, you've paid off your hardware. You own the hardware that your node is running on. So you can make any optimizations. You can make any changes you really want. And you also get to own the hardware. And after that, all you'll be paying is just how much electricity you use and us to maintain if there's any problems or anything. And that's about it. So it is allowing people that have really wanted to own their infra to just own their infra. Because if you look across Solana projects roadmaps, so many projects, they have in their roadmap transitioning to a self-owned / self-hosted system. At the same time, they can't. Because if they wanted to run a node, they're going to have to hire either an engineer or a system administrator or people to actually maintain it. It's not logical or feasible for 99% of companies, or even just random developers / DAOs or anyone across Solana. That's a problem. And it's a problem that can really easily be solved. So instead of making you hire someone, we maintain it for you. We run it for you. You don't need to do anything aside from just tell us how you want us to run it, and that's it.
And where do you think that's going to give you like the next like growth part? You know, like what do you need to know now as you're continuing to grow into the market? You know, what are some of like the big milestones that you want to accomplish that's going to like show that cool, we're now really growing and we're growing fast?
Across the next couple quarters, we're trying to build out new data center locations in countries where there has never been validators.
That's
So
fun.
Vietnam, you've got millions of users, millions of Solana users that have no access to local RPCs or validators or anything. That's one of the key locations we're going to target. And then aside from Vietnam, there are so many other countries that do not have access to their own Solana RPCs or Solana validators. That's sort of what we're going to do in the next couple of months. And soon you'll probably see an announcement from us about the Vietnamese node.
Very cool. And what's like driving this like continued like adoption of being able to want to push out more people owning their node, owning their infra? Like I think we talked about it a little bit, but is anything like personally to yourself that is like a real driver and why you believe this is so important?
I think most current providers, they price based on very slightly delusional numbers. Like they should not be this expensive. Yes, Solana nodes require specific hardware that may be harder to buy or is slightly more expensive compared to ETH. That doesn't mean it has to be 20 times the price for a dedicated node. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be. So that is one of the key things I'm going to work on changing. I don't want people to not be able to access infra just because someone decided to put a 10x price tag on it.
No, and I think that it's so important when we want to continue growing out the ecosystem beyond just like our Web3 bubble. You know, bringing more people in. You know, do you think there's a future where people are running nodes off their phones and like being able to contribute to networks on those kind of levels?
That would be a future very, very far. This is like 30, 40 years, I would say. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. Possible. It's just, will there be enough incentive for people to actually run it on their phone?
Well, what is in your future vision for like where things are starting to head towards? Do you have a thesis?
I believe Solana nodes will slowly transition to self-owned hardware, and latency across the entire chain will just slowly lower because people will realize you can optimize on the hardware front. You can make changes to the hardware instead of tweaking and hiring 20 developers to work on the software. That is something I think people will realize in the coming year, I think.
And just in general, you know, of like where you want the space to start moving towards, you know, is there any like key outlooks that you're excited for?
I have seen a lot of very traditional sort of financial companies start to look into how to integrate crypto. I think in a wider sort of space, I think Solana or crypto networks in general will be utilized more and more for microtransactions. Sorry, just transactions where it's very, very small amounts, especially in countries where the currency is weak or it's very unstable. Like your example is Turkey. There is actually shops that will take USDC now because their local currency is too unstable. It doesn't make sense for them to continue taking it when there's a better option for them. I think that is the sort of mass adoption that people have been hoping for, and I think it'll happen.
I think it's maybe interesting to also just think about your personal kind of path and that you want things to be heading towards. You know, how long because you are still quite young, still basically very much in like a shipper mindset. It's like I'm building, I'm here, I'm growing, I want to change the industry. You know, like I see a problem and I can't help but fix it. You know, it was an interesting. When I was speaking to the team Flight 3 team last week, and they had one of the head guys at Revolut come and speak to them, and he was like giving more the alpha about the stuff that they did. One of the internal things he was saying that they did and worked really well. They basically had these associates. These associates were really high agency, like early 20s. And they basically brought them in, trained them up a little bit, and then sent them into a department. And then they were ruthless at solving a problem. absolutely ruthless. And if they came into a department, you're fucked. Like they're coming in and they're changing stuff up. And that they had the energy and that kind of like relentless, ruthless mentality of like, I will solve this problem. You will not stop me until it's solved. And I feel like you're giving off that similar kind of energy when you're talking about like solving this hardware problem, making sure people own their infrastructure, reducing on the cost, making it easier for people to get involved. Where do you see that kind of taking you? Over these next decade, where do you think you'll be when you're like 27, 28?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
That's okay.
I have no clue where I'll continue doing. And I try to hire very, very like-minded people, people that are very aggressive, just like me. So hopefully I'll be able to keep this sort of team spirit alive across the sort of next couple years. And if we can do that, I think there really isn't any issue on Sol we couldn't solve.
That's very cool. And is there anyone that you particularly want to be able to start working with and start being able to do more stuff with in order to be able to continue growing out Noda?
Not at the moment.
No?
There might be, but it's just not a question that I can instantly answer you, I guess.
Yeah. And for yourself now, being able to look forward on seeing where Noda can be over these next couple of years, you're in this kind of, like, as you said, you're in this stage where it's like, we're going to grow fast. We're going to see where it can kind of take us and be able to then move on from there. Why do you think that you're going to be able to kind of take it forward? Like, is there something which you've noticed when you've been speaking to other founders that it's like, hey, you're missing this? Like when you talk about those associates, they were like ruthless in solving the problem. Even when you mentioned there, you have that kind of aggressive, like, I'll go for it. Like when you've been speaking to other people, have you noticed like they just don't have the same hunger as I do?
I would say that's one. The second thing is crypto people working on infra, they may not have experience/exposure to Web2 infra. And Web3 infra is very, very similar. Optimizations that were done in Web2 maybe 20 years ago is only now being applied into Web3. Because when you're talking about lowering latency, there's only so many things you can do. And it's a very sort of straight path. And you see many, many people just focusing, I guess, on the wrong thing. Yes, it may work in lowering some latency, but is it the most efficient thing for you to be working on? In my opinion, most people, no. You're not focusing on the right thing.
And so for yourself now, as you're starting to continue to grow out, are you spending all your time focused on Noda? Do you get time to do other things outside of it? Like are there any like sports, games, enjoyments that you're able to kind of get, or are you just like locked in?
I really like hiking, but at the same time, there isn't too much for me to do in London. So when I'm abroad, especially when I go back to Hong Kong or countries in Southeast Asia, I try to go hiking. But when I'm in the UK, I'm usually very locked in.
Yeah. Have you been to Edinburgh before?
No.
Edinburgh has some great hikes because you've got Arthur's Seat right there. And have you been to Wales before?
No, I have never left Southeast England, basically.
Because UK has some really cool hikes. You got the Lake District in Manchester. There's some really cool spaces. How many teams do you have here in the UK for Noda?
Full-time we have 4.
4. And how many teams globally for Noda?
Globally it's 15 full-time, but there's a lot of part-time people.
Yeah. Would you imagine doing like a team retreat, going to Wales, hiking up Snowdon Mountain, having team bonding?
I actually have never thought of that.
Yeah, so it's usually quite common for if you're, especially globally, you do like some sort of retreat and you bring everyone together for a week or a couple of days at least, depending on where you do it. And then that's a chance for everyone to get bonded. You'll do different big presentations, workshops on the vision for the company, where things are working, what you want to solve. It gives a chance, especially if there's new leadership as well coming in. It's really helpful to have everyone there to get everyone all on the same page. You can do different brainstorming sessions where it's like, hey, we do have these problems to solve. Don't have the answer yet. Can we figure it out here? When we're all together, whiteboards, like all of this fun stuff to be able to do it. And then that's like almost like sandwiched in between just like activities to do together. And it really builds out that like team spirit. And then when they go back to work after it, they'll remember that, helps kind of like really maintain that community spirit when you're being able to work with one another. And especially if everyone's all global, they kind of get all together in a single place. And it can be a really nice kind of like jump for your company.
That is something I definitely have to think about.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting, but I don't think I would do it in the UK, just mainly because the rest of my team is in here. So we'll probably pick somewhere closer to Southeast Asia because that's where quite a few of our team members are. So definitely a really interesting idea.
Yeah. No, you should have a little think about it. A little Noda team retreat. What would you want to do on the retreat? If you got to choose, maybe location is a factor, but if like different activities, like are we talking caving? Are we talking archery? Or are we talking skydiving? Are we just talking swimming with sharks? Like what would you personally quite fun to do?
I don't know. I think archery is definitely something that's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's sort of rare for me. I tried it once or twice when I was really small, but I never really got to experience it.
It's not that common, to be able to.
Common.
It's not like you can just go down the road and find your archery range. You have to go hunt it out, and it's usually like in certain locations.
Yes, it's that also will be hard to find in Southeast Asia.
You just have to kind of set up your own, but buy some bows off Amazon.
Is that legal? Would they?
That's a question. Depends where you are. As I think, as long as you're shooting at targets, you're not hunting anything. You're literally just shooting it at a wall. I mean, you should be fine. But don't quote me.
It's a weapon.
That. Yeah, but like a knife is a weapon, but you can still use it in your kitchen.
That is true.
Where do you hope that you can be able to be growing at your team a little bit more?
I think personally, we need to hire more in North America. Right now, the only reason is because I don't know where to find talent over there. It's kind of hard, especially we want people with at least a little bit of telco experience and also interested in Web3.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very rare.
Yeah.
Nearly impossible to find.
Well, it's also a lot more expensive as well.
Yes.
So you have that kind of like battle with going to Toronto next week for Consensus, and then going
tomorrow,
to New York.
Actually.
So tomorrow, there we go, straight off. And then going to New York for Accelerate.
Of course.
There we go. So hopefully, maybe in those little trips, you'll be able to find somebody who can be able to get involved.
I'm hopefully going to find someone, I think, at the developer conference at Accelerate. I hope there will be some people I can speak to. I think it's probably the easiest place for me to get a gauge of whether or not there's the sort of talent I'm looking for.
What would you describe as those traits that you ideally want to see in somebody?
There's so many roles we need to hire. So there's so many different traits.
Well, what is like the consistent one? Like for myself, I love to see like grit.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see that you understand the process of being able to do things, and you have that kind of ability to withstand the kind of consistent grind that can happen, and then you can consistently show up and push yourself to next levels as we continue to grow.
Because we run a lot of infrastructure, we need reliable people. We need people that, like, sometimes, not really ever, but let's say a server goes down, you'll need someone to actually immediately go and fix it.
Yep.
Even if it's like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need someone that is willing to sort of do this sort of job where at any random point there may be times where we need them.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Is there something that speaks to you when you're able to like find somebody that you like, I can depend on you? Like how does that when you're running your team make you feel?
I feel like I do a lot of hiring just purely based off gut.
Yeah.
feeling, because like I think I get a decent gauge of people when I meet
Mhm.
them. I'm not sure how true that is, but
Has it proved you wrong so far?
I mean, not really in a
Okay.
serious way. Some minor incidents.
There are always going to be challenges. You know, like whenever you're building something, the whole point, in, especially like when you're building like your own business, you know, you're going to fail and you'll learn from those failures, and that's how you can consistently build. Were there any moments in your journey which was like actually like a really pinnacle failure? You know, that you learned a lot through going through, and you had to just learn it the hard way.
Mm, this wasn't Noder. It was a Web2 one.
Yep.
But there was one point where we overly relied on one single vendor supplier.
Yep.
And then they weren't able to fulfill. We almost lost a really, really big contract over it. And that was really scary because trusting people too much maybe is not a great thing, I guess, or relying on people too much is not a great thing. It's sort of why I went from VPN company to running what a VPN company needs.
Mm.
I don't really like completely relying on certain people / vendors.
Yeah, there are the dependencies around it, and it is something where like it also sounded like there was like almost like a single point of failure that you
Almost,
had,
yes.
and it wasn't that was that because it was a provider in a specific region.
Yes. It's very, very hard for us to find trustable providers if I'm not physically there.
Mm.
And it's not always feasible to hire someone to find someone in each specific location. So some of them we just sort of had to trust and just find random ones to use. That is sort of why there was that single point of failure. After that happened, we never really rely on any one single vendor after that. Like if we're ordering 100 units of one item, we will split into 3 different orders with 3 different vendors. We could not care less that it costed more, but at least we know it won't just all not come, basically.
No, but it's such an important lesson, and like you're only gonna learn these like sometimes the hard way when you are, because especially if you're scaling fast.
Exactly.
You know,
Yes.
you just need it. You're just like I need it. I need to get the best way you can do it. You can fulfill it. Great, cool, handshake, let's go. But then yeah, you can have those follow throughs.
It's really, really annoying to deal with.
Have there been any like points in the journey
Mm.
where it's been like, is it like it feels like it's pushing against you? Because being a founder is really hard, you know, and I'm sure you've experienced this. There's the desire, there's this need to fix the problems, but it also comes with like heavy baggage and like this weight you have to lift on your shoulders. And it's why most people aren't like set up to be a founder. And why with your kind of skill set, you could easily gone into a role, you know, and like a handsome figure, being able to work with them, you know. But what keeps you like being like, well, I have to be able to hold on to this, and kind of like gives you that resilience to keep going?
It's nearly impossible to find a workplace or something you can work on where it's actually what you want to do and it's actually what you believe in. Like, even if it's an industry that you're really interested in, it may not be the exact same sort of goals or visions you may have in your head. It's basically impossible to find, which is sort of why I don't really like working for people. It's a really
it's fair. It's like it's not for everybody.
exactly. So I have very strong opinions on some things,
Yeah.
which make it even more, I guess, in a sense, severe. Where I don't think I would really survive working for someone unless I'm really aligned with their visions or goals, basically.
And it's beyond what we've already talked about. Is there something that like really kind of continues to drive you now? You know, like even beyond Noda, you know, just like in general of like, this is when time gets tough. I repeat this to myself in my head, and this really allows me to keep growing.
This is a really funny one where some people have told me that they don't know why I'm thinking like this, but basically 20 years ago, there was so many fintech startups or things coming out of Hong Kong. Recently, there's been little to none. And then I have a personal target where I think there's still a lot of talent there. It's just people are not trying to do things because there's no support structure there. So I want to be able to get to a point where I can actually support talent I see, people I find that are really talented, sort of like what Super Team UK is doing, not just UK, just Super Team globally is doing. But I want to do it in a very sort of concentrated and directed way, where we focus on very small amounts of people that are very, very talented. That's sort of like a long-term personal goal.
Yeah.
It's just something I want to do. It's like,
It's an accelerator.
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But
For a small cohort.
exactly.
What would you do it for? Like, if they were just building like I want to get really good at this skill, or would it be company based? You know,
I haven't thought about it that much.
Well, we want to think about it now. You know, like what would pique you more curiosity? Because the idea of like career based. So if I'm helping somebody get a job, then it's very much more skill development.
Yes.
So I'm going to be teaching you about certain parts of what the role looks like. I'm going to be surrounding you by mentors who have done the role. You're going to be basically learning very much more skill based. If it's more startup based, I think it's a lot more focused on like actual like results. You know, so you're trying to get that founder access to capital. You're trying to get that founder distribution. You're trying to get that founder different service providers who can work with them and give them the best rates and be able to get the result really quickly. You know, so on one hand, with the jobs, it's about the skill. So it's about upskilling them. And the other side with the founder, it's about connecting them, you know, making sure that they're getting the right kind of skills. Does like even when I just describe those two different versions of an accelerator, is there one side that sticks out to you? It's like, oh yeah, that one.
I mean, for me, it would 100% be the founder side, because like I can't teach you how to be a perfect candidate if I don't really know what I would be as a candidate, in a sense. So it's really difficult for me to teach that. That's sort of why I think I would focus more on founders. I would focus more on projects or ideas that I really believe in. A support structure should not always just limit it to just connections. There can be a lot of other stuff. Like I can provide infrastructure for them. I can basically just foot their bill for hardware or whatever, and I can just help them. That's sort of a very high level vision of what I thought / had in mind.
I think it will probably be a natural evolution of Noda. So if you cut to Noda in a few years, you will probably be able to launch like a little bit of an accelerator off of it. You know, Helios done this recently. And I think it's like almost like a growth mechanism of like how you can be onboarding more founders towards it and be businesses utilizing the tech. And so, yeah, I can 100% see you launching like a little Noda accelerator model where you're taking like a couple of really cool startups. They're getting almost free infra to be able to be scaling with. And then you've been able to kind of like set them up. You've got these different industry connections that can then be able to come in. They've got them the hardware to enable them to push forward. And that mentorship and guidance has allowed them to now just continue growing at that startup.
IO.net is doing something very similar, where they're providing sort of compute grants, where they allow people to have access to compute if they believe in your idea. That's partially what I want to be, but a lot more than just compute, because they don't provide you with any other support in a sense.
Yep. Yeah, no, like that's very much like a grant program done to like give you that funding. Yeah, I think it's super powerful when you're able to then start noticing all the different ways at which you've needed help building your startup, and that you're now able to kind of like pass that on. You know, with this huge philosophy of win and help win. And so that's like the perfect version of that is when your company is able to grow to a point you can have like a little bit of an accelerator running as well when you're able to help those teams.
It would be a topic that I guess I very much want to work on, even if I didn't have Noda. Like, even if I didn't found Noda, I most likely would have done this with the previous company. It's been something I wanted to do for a really long time.
And it's really important to notice those, because we almost get like pulled in many different directions, but there's usually like a path which like you're healing, you're like, you can feel the calling towards. You know, why do you think that that's the one that's been driving you, and like why you want to be able to kind of help pass on the learnings that you've got?
because a lot of what I learned was from people mentoring me. If I feel like so many people believed in me or trusted me and taught me and spent so much time to allow me to learn things, I feel like I kind of have to give back. Not like as an obligation. I feel like I need to. I should. If I have the ability to, why not?
No, and it's so powerful when you're able to notice these kind of things because they act as like a real good beacon and like a controlling factor of like if I'm working on this, will it help people? You know, like will it serve the not necessarily the exact people that help me, but like types of people who are helping people and are continuing to grow, and that can now going to be able to take on additional support in order to be able to support and take things to that next level.
Yes. So a support structure is the most important thing if it's a first-time founder.
Oh yeah.
If it didn't exist, I don't think most projects right now would exist. Because so many successful projects are first-time founders.
Mhm.
They most likely didn't know what they were doing. They got mentored by someone. There just needs to be a very sort of clear-cut way for founders or people that are interested in pursuing an idea as a startup to actually learn, to actually gain access to things, I guess.
And I think it's really important to have those things one-on-one as well.
Yes.
Because in group settings you can get a kind of idea, but it's only until you like actually sit down with them where you actually get like, okay, this is what you need. And one-on-one isn't scalable. You know, you could do cohorts, so you could have people come in group by group. You can have small little member groups where people, if you're in this group, you can get access to the one-on-one. But the one-on-one isn't necessarily going to scale to 10,000 people.
You won't.
But there are lots of problems to be solved. There are lots of founders who are constantly coming forward and like people who need that kind of additional. So I do see the opportunity of having these like niche accelerators. So it's like hyper focused on if you're building this type of product, we have the right support to be able to help you. Because then you actually create a better product as well. You create a better accelerator because you're really nailed into that industry, those connections, and that can allow you to really make sure that all the support that they're receiving, any of the benefits, like you talk about hardware, if there's any like other companies like software and services that you can be able to also do deals with because you're getting like really high quality people for them that you can know to scale. You can create an awesome kind of experience for people who are coming through because you mostly have the blueprint to help them go forward. And every now and then you'll get the fun one, which is brand new. And you're like, cool, this is a new problem that we have to solve. And we have to figure out how to help you scale and grow. And it is super rewarding. I can tell you that because like running Super Team, it's kind of what we have to do as well, helping everyone. And so it is like an incredibly rewarding experience to be able to be a part of that and know that you're helping make a difference in these founders' lives.
Okay, then let me ask you a question.
No.
What was the hardest thing when you were sort of building the structure of Super Team UK, helping founders in the UK? What was the hardest single thing?
So when you talk about the structure, you're talking about how we help founders versus like generally how we're organized as like a community.
Yes, how you help
acceleration.
Exactly.
If I was to think of, because there's two ways to think about that. There's one way to think about, okay, what was the biggest problem that the founders have that we try to optimize around? And then what was the biggest problem in just like executing on that? I'll start with this side. So what the founders needed help with. And it usually comes down to marketing and funding. You know, they need funds to be able to build up their project and they need distribution once they've been able to get that out there. There's tons of other like tertiary things to this. So, you know, like that's why I talk about like the access to service, professional services, things like this. Because they're going to need someone to help out with that set up their legal stuff and need someone trusted and they know you can do that. They're going to need somebody to help them with even like small things like branding and design to like editing and like all of these other different parts of building out your business from the kind of like marketing commercial side all the way towards like you need hiring. Actually, wait, yeah, I said that was the other one. So like marketing, funding and hiring. You know, you need talent to be able to join you so you can scale out. But I guess hiring only happens once you've got the funding.
That is very true.
And so there's usually it begins with those two. And then like the difficulty part of actually creating that is getting these teams funded. So this works it's a super team globally as well. There's like a spotlight system that we have to kind of like shine. Okay, cool. Here's the founders who are raising.
Yes.
The feedback we always got was a lot of the teams didn't have a lead. And the investors would wait and say, hey, we'll wait until you have the lead. And so I think that's been one of like the big parts of being able to help these teams is getting them to the point that they can get a lead investor and allowing them to understand different processes they need to go through, traction they need to be able to have, telling that right story, and then being able to get them in front of as many investors as they can in order to land that lead investor. And so I'd say that was probably, if I was to think about what has been one of the hardest problems for them, it's being able to get them that lead investor. Because once they have that, then they can fulfill the round. Once they can fulfill the round, now they have the capital in order to start getting in marketing people. Because that's usually like when we've like talked about these early stage founders and they're like, I need a market, I need to get my product out there. And traditionally, it just usually comes down to where you need to hire someone to do your marketing. You know, you can have a level of like founder growth. And it's almost like an indicator towards us if they're a good quality team and founder, if they know the initial customer bases that they can go out to and be onboarding them to be able to scale out. And if they're like that founder-led marketing, if they're on the front lines. And so they don't have to necessarily grow the company account to be growing the business because the founder is growing out and being able to push that, which is trickling down into it. But then for the teams who don't have this, usually on the case of, okay, you need a higher team, you know, whether that's an agency to help give you that big boost, or that's then like a actual full-time hire that you can be able to bring in to do it. It doesn't work until you then have their funding. So it's usually been around making sure they get up to be investor ready, then getting that lead investor so that they can then have the knock-on effect of fulfilling the round, bringing on the team, and then being able to like market and grow out from there.
I think another problem that first-time founders have is they don't know if their project or their idea is actually VC fundable. VCs don't care if you don't have a massive growth potential. They're trying to shoot a long shot. That's what VCs are essentially doing. So when most projects currently that's trying to raise, the reason they can't find a lead is either their current model without pivoting is not VC fundable, or is not something that can grow 50 times, or it's just an idea that can't scale at all. So I think that is something that across Superteam globally, so many people are starting projects, trying to raise, and then realizing this project won't work in the long term. So what do you think is the easiest way to gauge if an idea is VC fundable?
From the perspective of if the founder can deliver on it, or if the idea is investable?
Let's say the idea.
So if the idea, then you ideally, well, one part of it is you want to learn something new. You know, they got to have their secret. You know, what's that new thing that they know that nobody else knows?
Basically the moat.
And like that gives them that edge, because that's how they can tap into a market. You know, they can break into a market with this new approach, or it's like a blue ocean and they're creating a whole new market for themselves that they're able to grow into. So that's usually like, I guess, like the top level of the idea that they're able to have, because then they can show clearly, as long as the market's big enough, that they have this ability to grow to that point. And it's also for the investors when they're going through tons and tons of decks and seeing tons and tons of teams, you know, they want to get that little wow factor. They want to go, oh, okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Cool. Like they want to feel that moment when they're going through it. And then on the team side, if the founder can deliver on it, it's usually around the idea of their founder market fit. So if they've had experience in that, that's why you have a really nice story from the VPN to the servers to the Noda, because it was a natural progression for you. You had the founder market fit when starting the server business because you'd been the customer with the VPN business, and then in the right fit of like being Noda because you then had the server business. So you had then that kind of like story to then take you forward. If you're trying to launch a real estate tokenization business, but you've been a doctor for the past decade, you're probably not going to do as well as somebody who's been in the real estate industry for a long while. But then it's also then paired with your team, so co-founders and there to then be able to blend one another together so that you can then have a cohesive set of experiences and set and allow you to then be able to deliver onto it. So I would say like there's the one side of making sure you've got the scalability with then the idea and you've got that moat and that secret and nobody else knows, and you're able to show how that lends into how your team have the ability to execute, break out into the market and be able to reach that kind of scale and point that makes the VC interested and wants to get involved.
I think that is a great explanation, because this question I've asked to many super team country leads, and some have been very vague. I think your response is one of the most in-depth I've heard so far.
So there we go. I'll take it. Well, I'm deep in the weeds. So it's the whole reason why I've designed Super Team UK as like an accelerator, and why I've said it all the way from the start is my job is to help you succeed. And I've got two types of people that I want to help succeed. I've got these founders building these businesses, and I've got people who want to build their career and have a job. And so what is really beautiful is that when we help these startups grow, getting on that funding, who do they want to hire from? They want to hire from the people we've been working with because they're also part of the same community, so they've seen each other and they know that's good work. And then they're now able to hire, and we're create this like really cool cyclical effect where we bring founders up, we level them up, and then we're able to give them the quality team members to help them continue to scale out. And so it's been very focused on like, I'm not here to help you win a hackathon. I'm here to help you build your business. And now winning a hackathon is part of that journey because it makes it so much easier to me to introduce you to any partners in the ecosystem, to be able to give you that social credibility, get a bit of money, and you potentially can go into an accelerator as well to get additional money and additional support around it. But it's only a single part of the journey. The real magic is can you raise out that capital? Because we have this like pathways, like you start as an early stage founder. Our goal there is basically get you investor ready. And the whole positioning is around how you're able to have the traction, and the traction doesn't need to be tens of thousands of people. It can be only a few people, but like high quality people who have validated what you're building. If it's businesses, more B2B, do you have these like MOUs already signed, or at least them saying, if you have this, I will pay for it, like a level of like validation from what they're able to do. You've then got this right story of how you've been able to find out this problem, figure out the solution, bring together the initial right people to be able to solve it with you. You've then able to execute and get that traction. And now you're at a point where you need to be able to scale, you need to be on the funding, you need to go to the next level. And then you dotted all the I's and T's in order to make sure that you're all ready. Okay, and then and this is what I want to work on a little bit more, is like this like fundraising task force to help you get that lead. Really focus on like one-on-one. We've got all these relationships with investors. We're gonna focus on building out like more relationships. And I kind of want it at the point where if I call the investor and say, hey, I got someone for you, they're on the other line knowing exactly the reason why I'm calling, because I've got an exact startup that fits their thesis. I'm calling because they're at the right time to be able to go into it. And like the brand of Super Team and the brand of what we've been able to here in the UK elevates is like, cool, I'm going to pick up this phone because this is going to be a great startup that is going to give me deal flow too. And then through those one-on-one relationship connections, we can get that person funded. And then they now become a capital backed team. Now we have different support that we want to offer a team to a capital backed. And that's more around how do we get them the distribution across like the Super Team network, how are we being able to accelerate the partnerships that they're having across, and like different ways of being able to kind of help support them. And the goal is to then take those capital backed teams to become now globally renowned Solana ecosystem teams. Like you can read off like the big names that you have on Solana ecosystem, people from like Jupiter to Squads to Fuse, all the way through to like your Drifts and How do we take these like homegrown founders and get them up to that stage? And then like Super Team globally has this like Oscar speech test. So it's like when they're up there doing their Oscar speech, did they say, I couldn't have done this at Super Team? They were there for me from day one, and they got me all the way here. And that's the way I've kind of then been like trying to solve that problem of like, how are we growing Super Team as a community? Well, it's an accelerator, and that's why people want to be a part of it, because they know that they're going to be able to get that support. And then how are we taking these founders all the way through that journey, so that when they're up there doing their Oscar speech, they're like, I couldn't have done it without these guys.
Super Team is a very, very unique sort of organization that's very rare across not just crypto, it's just every industry. I don't think I've ever seen an organization this well organized and this spread out globally. And it actually works. I've seen so many projects go through Super Teams, help, or just basically just learn from you guys. And you are doing incredible work that one day I hope I can do something similar.
No, and I'm excited to be able to help you along the journey so we can get you there. I want to see Noda up in the stars. Able to be like, own your infra, be a part of it. And I think that's going to be an awesome next stage to be able to like take it towards. If you were to give anyone else a piece of advice, like any young founder, so specifically young founders, because like you walked this path. So if you're like 12, 15, really like, but you've got the energy, you've got the passion, similar to yourself, would you have any key pieces of advice to them?
You don't know if something works until you try it. So don't just immediately go, oh, I don't think I can do that when you have an idea. Don't think it's too big for you. It might be at your current point of time, but you can build it slowly. You can build things slowly. You can do things slowly. You can perhaps scale it down to something you personally could do. And this is a really key thing. You need to be confident in yourself, and you need to know that if you try, 90% of the time, you're actually going to be able to do something.
Awesome. Well, that's a beautiful sentiment to end on. Thea, I appreciate you joining us here today on the Great British Builder podcast. And yeah, thank you for being able to be a part of it.
Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. And there we go. They went well.
Yeah.